Margaret thought she was finally enjoying her golden years when she settled into her favorite corner of the living room sofa each evening to watch her stories on television, but what she didn't realize was that her comfortable ritual was slowly destroying her spine in ways that would leave her barely able to walk within just 18 months. The shocking truth about how millions of people over 60 are unknowingly damaging their backs every single day while doing something as innocent as relaxing on their couch will change everything you thought you knew about rest and recovery in your later years. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another health tip you can ignore, it's a wake-up call that could literally save you from a future of chronic pain, mobility loss, and dependence on others for the most basic daily activities. The research is clear, the evidence is overwhelming, and the consequences of continuing these seemingly harmless habits are more severe than most people could ever imagine. Every single evening, across countless homes around the world, a silent epidemic is unfolding as people over 60 settle into their sofas with the best of intentions, seeking comfort and relaxation after decades of hard work, only to unknowingly accelerate the deterioration of their spinal health through postures and positions that compress vertebrae, strain muscles, and create imbalances that compound over time until they become irreversible sources of agony. Dr. Patricia Williams, a leading orthopedic specialist who has spent over 20 years studying age-related spinal degeneration, recently published findings that should terrify anyone who spends more than 30 minutes at a time lounging on their couch. Her research followed over 2,000 adults between the ages of 60 and 75 for a period of 3 years, meticulously documenting their daily habits, measuring their spinal curvature changes, and tracking their pain levels and mobility decline. What she discovered was that participants who regularly engaged in what she termed harmful resting postures experienced spinal compression rates that were 3 times higher than those who maintained proper positioning even during relaxation. The most devastating part of this research isn't just the numbers, it's the stories of real people whose lives were fundamentally altered by something as simple as how they chose to sit on their furniture. Take Robert, a 72-year-old retired teacher who prided himself on his active lifestyle and excellent health throughout most of his adult life. Robert had always been the type of man who took care of himself, eating well, staying active, and visiting his doctor regularly for checkups. But like so many others his age, Robert had developed a particular way of settling into his reclining sofa each evening that felt incredibly comfortable and relaxing. He would sink deep into the cushions, allowing his lower back to curve dramatically as he stretched his legs out and tilted his head forward to watch television. This position felt so natural and restful that Robert would often remain there for 3 to 4 hours at a time, completely unaware that each evening was contributing to a progressive compression of his lumbar vertebrae that was slowly but systematically destroying the structural integrity of his spine. Within just 14 months of retiring and increasing his couch time significantly, Robert began experiencing what he initially dismissed as minor aches and stiffness in his lower back. He attributed these sensations to getting older and perhaps overdoing it in his garden, never connecting them to his relaxation habits. But as weeks turned into months, these minor discomforts evolved into genuine pain that began affecting his sleep, his mood, and his ability to perform activities he had always taken for granted. Simple tasks like reaching into overhead cabinets, bending to pick up grandchildren's toys, or even standing up from seated positions became increasingly difficult and painful. By the time Robert finally sought medical attention, imaging revealed significant compression in 3 of his lumbar vertebrae, disc space narrowing that indicated advanced degeneration, and muscle imbalances that had developed as his body tried to compensate for the structural damage that had been occurring night after night on his living room sofa. The tragic irony of Robert's situation is that it was completely preventable, but like millions of others, he had never been educated about the hidden dangers lurking in everyday activities that seem perfectly innocent and even beneficial. The human spine, particularly in individuals over 60, is incredibly vulnerable to the effects of sustained poor positioning, especially when combined with the natural changes that occur in bone density, muscle mass, and joint flexibility as we age. When you sink into a soft sofa in a way that allows your spine to curve unnaturally, you create a perfect storm of mechanical stress that accelerates wear and tear on every component of your spinal structure. The vertebrae become compressed under uneven pressure, the discs between them are squeezed and distorted, the ligaments that hold everything together are stretched beyond their optimal length, and the muscles that should be supporting your spine are either overworked in some areas or completely relaxed in others, creating imbalances that persist long after you stand up and walk away from the couch. But the story gets even more concerning when you consider that most people over 60 are spending increasingly large amounts of time in these problematic positions without any awareness of the cumulative damage being inflicted on their bodies. Recent surveys indicate that the average person in their 60s or 70s spends between 4 to 6 hours per day sitting on furniture that doesn't provide adequate spinal support, with much of this time occurring in slouched, curved, or twisted positions that would be immediately recognized as harmful if they occurred during exercise or work activities. The difference is that because these positions feel comfortable and relaxing in the short term, people never develop an association between their couch time and their back problems, allowing the damage to continue unchecked for months or even years before symptoms become severe enough to seek medical attention. The physiological mechanisms behind this type of damage are both fascinating and terrifying when you understand exactly what's happening inside your body during those seemingly peaceful hours on the sofa. Your spinal column consists of 24 individual vertebrae, each separated by shock-absorbing discs and held in precise alignment by an intricate network of muscles, ligaments, and tendons that work together to distribute weight and movement forces evenly throughout your back. This system is incredibly effective when maintained in proper alignment, but it becomes vulnerable to breakdown when subjected to sustained periods of unnatural curvature or compression. When you sink into a soft couch cushion, your pelvis tilts backward, which forces your lumbar spine into an exaggerated curve that places tremendous pressure on the posterior portions of your vertebrae and discs. Simultaneously, your upper back often rounds forward as you strain to see the television screen, creating additional stress on your thoracic vertebrae and the muscles of your neck and shoulders. This dual-direction spinal distortion creates what researchers call a cascade effect, where problems in one area of the spine inevitably lead to compensatory changes in other areas, ultimately affecting the entire kinetic chain from your skull down to your pelvis. Dr. Michael Thompson, a biomechanical engineer who specializes in age-related postural changes, explains that the forces generated during improper couch positioning can exceed normal spinal loading by as much as 400%, creating pressure levels that are comparable to those experienced during heavy lifting or high-impact activities, but sustained for hours at a time rather than just moments. The cumulative effect of this sustained loading is a gradual but relentless compression of spinal structures that leads to disc degeneration, vertebral compression fractures, muscle atrophy, and the development of chronic pain patterns that become increasingly difficult to reverse as time passes. The most insidious aspect of this process is that it occurs so gradually that most people don't realize anything is wrong until significant damage has already occurred. Unlike an acute injury that produces immediate pain and forces you to seek treatment, the type of spinal damage caused by poor resting postures develops over months and years, with symptoms that often masquerade as normal aging or are attributed to other causes entirely. Many people dismiss their increasing back stiffness as simply a consequence of getting older, never realizing that their daily habits are accelerating the aging process in their spine and creating problems that could have been prevented with simple changes to their resting positions and furniture choices. Consider the story of Elizabeth, a 68-year-old grandmother who spent decades caring for her family and looking forward to retirement as a time when she could finally relax and enjoy the comfort of her home without the constant demands of work and child-rearing. Elizabeth had purchased a beautiful sectional sofa for her living room, complete with deep cushions and multiple reclining positions that seemed like the epitome of luxury and comfort. Every afternoon, she would settle into her favorite corner of the sectional, pulling her knees up toward her chest and curling into what felt like a wonderfully cozy position while she read books or watched television. This curled-up posture felt so natural and comforting that Elizabeth often remained in it for hours at a time, completely absorbed in her activities and blissfully unaware that she was creating a recipe for spinal disaster. The position that felt so comfortable to Elizabeth was actually forcing her spine into an extreme flexion that placed enormous stress on her vertebrae, compressed her discs unevenly, and gradually weakened the posterior ligaments that help maintain spinal stability. Over the course of nearly 2 years, this daily habit created progressive changes in her spinal structure that began manifesting as increasing difficulty standing up straight after prolonged sitting, morning stiffness that lasted longer and longer each day, and a gradual loss of height as her vertebrae compressed under the sustained abnormal loading. By the time Elizabeth realized that her comfort routine was actually harming her body, she had developed what her doctor described as significant thoracic kyphosis, a condition where the upper spine becomes excessively curved forward, creating a hunched appearance that affected not only her physical health but also her breathing capacity, her confidence, and her overall quality of life. The scientific evidence supporting the connection between improper resting positions and accelerated spinal degeneration continues to mount as researchers around the world focus more attention on the daily habits that contribute to age-related health problems. A comprehensive study published in the International Journal of Geriatric Medicine followed over 1,500 adults aged 65 and older for a period of 5 years, carefully documenting their furniture preferences, sitting habits, and spinal health outcomes. The results were stark and undeniable. Participants who regularly used soft, unsupportive seating and adopted poor postures during rest periods showed significantly higher rates of vertebral compression, disc degeneration, and chronic pain development compared to those who maintained better postural habits even during relaxation. More importantly, the study found that these changes occurred regardless of participants' overall activity levels, meaning that even people who exercised regularly and maintained active lifestyles were not immune to the damaging effects of poor resting postures. This research fundamentally challenges the common assumption that exercise and general fitness are sufficient to protect spinal health as we age. While staying active is undoubtedly important, it cannot undo the damage caused by spending hours each day in positions that place abnormal stress on spinal structures. The spine requires consistent, appropriate positioning throughout all activities, including rest and relaxation, to maintain its structural integrity and function properly over time. This means that the choices you make about how to position your body on your sofa are just as important for your long-term health as the choices you make about exercise, nutrition, or medical care. The biomechanical principles underlying healthy spinal positioning are actually quite simple once you understand what your spine needs to function optimally. Your vertebral column has natural curves that are designed to distribute weight and absorb shock efficiently, but only when these curves are maintained within their normal ranges and supported properly by surrounding muscles and ligaments. The lumbar spine should maintain a gentle forward curve called lordosis, while the thoracic spine maintains a mild backward curve called kyphosis, creating an S-shaped profile that maximizes strength and flexibility while minimizing stress on individual spinal components. When you sit on furniture that allows these natural curves to be lost or exaggerated beyond their normal ranges, you create mechanical disadvantages that force your spinal structures to work much harder to support your body weight and maintain stability. The key to protecting your spine during rest periods lies in choosing positions and furniture that support these natural curves while allowing your muscles to relax without completely abandoning their supportive role. This doesn't mean you have to sit rigidly upright or avoid relaxation entirely, but it does mean becoming more conscious about how you position your body and making adjustments that preserve spinal alignment while still allowing you to enjoy comfort and rest. Small changes in how you use your existing furniture, combined with strategic additions like lumbar support cushions or different seating options, can make enormous differences in the long-term health and function of your spine. The transformation stories of people who have made these changes are both inspiring and instructive, demonstrating that it's never too late to begin protecting your spinal health and potentially reversing some of the damage that may have already occurred. Martha, a 74-year-old retired nurse, had been experiencing increasing back pain and stiffness for over 3 years before she learned about the connection between her couch habits and her symptoms. Martha's evening routine had involved sinking deep into her favorite recliner, pulling her knees up, and often falling asleep in a twisted position while watching the news. When her physical therapist explained how these positions were contributing to her pain, Martha was initially skeptical because the positions felt so comfortable and natural. However, Martha decided to experiment with her physical therapist's suggestions, beginning with simple changes like placing a firm lumbar support pillow behind her back and keeping her feet flat on the floor instead of pulling her knees up. She also began setting a timer to remind herself to change positions every 30 minutes and to stand up and walk around briefly before settling back down. Within just 6 weeks of implementing these changes, Martha noticed that her morning stiffness had decreased significantly, and she was able to stand up from her chair without the gradual unfolding process that had become her norm. After 3 months, her back pain had reduced by more than half, and she reported feeling more energetic and confident in her movements throughout the day. The improvements Martha experienced weren't just subjective feelings, they were reflected in measurable changes in her posture, flexibility, and functional capacity that her healthcare providers could document and track over time. Follow-up imaging showed that the progression of disc space narrowing had slowed considerably, and muscle strength testing revealed improvements in her core stability and spinal support capabilities. Most importantly for Martha, these changes translated into a return to activities she had gradually given up due to back pain, including gardening, playing with her grandchildren, and taking longer walks in her neighborhood. Martha's story illustrates an important principle that gives hope to anyone who may have already developed some degree of spinal damage from poor resting habits. While some changes may be irreversible, the progression of damage can often be slowed or stopped entirely with appropriate interventions, and many symptoms can be significantly improved even in cases where structural changes have already occurred. The human body has remarkable capacity for adaptation and healing, especially when provided with the right conditions and support to facilitate recovery processes. Understanding exactly how to create these right conditions requires knowledge about the specific mechanisms that lead to spinal problems during rest periods and the practical strategies that can address each of these mechanisms effectively. The primary culprits in couch-related spinal damage include loss of lumbar lordosis, excessive thoracic flexion, lateral spinal curvature, sustained muscle tension in some areas combined with complete relaxation in others, and compression of spinal nerves and blood vessels that can affect circulation and nerve function throughout the entire body. Loss of lumbar lordosis occurs when you sink into soft cushions that don't provide adequate support for the natural curve of your lower back, causing this region of your spine to flatten or even curve backward in a way that places enormous pressure on the anterior portions of your vertebrae and discs. This type of positioning is particularly problematic because it forces the posterior muscles of your spine to work overtime to prevent complete collapse while simultaneously placing the anterior spinal structures under compression loads they weren't designed to handle for extended periods. Excessive thoracic flexion happens when you crane your neck forward to see a television screen or lean forward to read, creating an exaggerated rounding of your upper back that compresses the anterior portions of your thoracic vertebrae and places sustained tension on the posterior muscles and ligaments of your neck and upper back. This position is especially damaging because it affects not only your spinal alignment but also your breathing capacity, as the rounded shoulder position restricts the expansion of your rib cage and can lead to shallow, inefficient breathing patterns that reduce oxygen delivery throughout your body. Lateral spinal curvature develops when you consistently favor one side while resting, perhaps leaning against an armrest or curling up in a way that creates uneven loading on the left and right sides of your spine. While occasional asymmetrical positioning isn't necessarily harmful, sustained or repeated lateral curvature can lead to muscle imbalances, uneven wear on spinal joints, and the development of chronic pain patterns that affect your posture and movement even when you're not on the couch. The sustained muscle tension that occurs in some areas while other muscles become completely inactive creates a particularly problematic situation where your body loses its natural ability to distribute loads evenly throughout the spinal support system. Some muscles become chronically tight and overworked, developing trigger points and tension patterns that persist long after you change positions, while other muscles become weak and inhibited, losing their ability to provide adequate support when you need them during daily activities. Compression of spinal nerves and blood vessels occurs when poor positioning creates pressure points that interfere with normal circulation and nerve function, potentially leading to numbness, tingling, reduced sensation, and even referral pain patterns that can affect areas far removed from the actual source of compression. This type of compression is particularly concerning in older adults who may already have some degree of circulatory compromise or nerve function changes related to other health conditions. Addressing each of these mechanisms requires a comprehensive approach that combines proper positioning techniques, appropriate furniture modifications, regular movement breaks, targeted exercises to restore muscle balance and strength, and ongoing attention to postural habits throughout all daily activities. The good news is that none of these interventions require expensive equipment or dramatic lifestyle changes, but they do require consistency and a willingness to prioritize long-term spinal health over short-term comfort preferences. The most effective positioning strategies begin with maintaining the natural curves of your spine while allowing your muscles to relax as much as possible without abandoning their supportive roles entirely. This means sitting with your back against a supportive surface that maintains your lumbar lordosis, keeping your feet flat on the floor or on a footrest that keeps your knees at approximately hip level, positioning your head and neck in alignment with your spine rather than craning forward, and changing positions regularly to prevent any single posture from being maintained for extended periods. Furniture modifications can make enormous differences in your ability to maintain proper positioning while still enjoying comfort and relaxation. Adding a firm lumbar support cushion to your existing seating can help maintain the natural curve of your lower back even when using soft furniture. Adjusting the height of your seating surface or adding a footrest can help achieve optimal knee and hip positioning. Using additional pillows or cushions to support your arms and reduce shoulder tension can help maintain better upper body alignment. In some cases, investing in furniture specifically designed to support proper spinal alignment may be necessary, but often simple modifications to existing furniture can produce significant improvements. Regular movement breaks are essential because even the best positioning becomes problematic when maintained for hours at a time without variation. Setting a timer to remind yourself to stand up, stretch, and change positions every 20 to 30 minutes can prevent the development of stiffness and muscle imbalances that contribute to pain and dysfunction. These breaks don't need to be lengthy or elaborate. Even standing up, walking to another room, doing a few gentle stretches, and then returning to your rest position with renewed attention to proper alignment can be incredibly beneficial. Targeted exercises to restore muscle balance and strength become increasingly important as we age and need to counteract the natural changes that occur in muscle mass, bone density, and joint flexibility over time. Simple exercises that strengthen your core muscles, improve spinal flexibility, and address muscle imbalances can be incredibly effective in supporting better posture and reducing pain, even when done for just a few minutes each day. The key is consistency and progression, gradually building strength and flexibility rather than attempting dramatic changes that could potentially cause injury. Ongoing attention to postural habits throughout all daily activities helps reinforce the benefits gained from improved resting positions and prevents the development of compensation patterns that could undermine your progress. This means becoming more aware of how you sit at dining tables, in cars, at desks, and in other seating situations throughout your day, applying the same principles of spinal alignment and support that you use during rest periods. The cumulative effect of implementing these strategies consistently over time can be truly transformative, not just for your spinal health but for your overall quality of life, energy levels, confidence, and ability to remain independent and active as you continue aging. The investment of time and attention required to make these changes is minimal compared to the potential benefits, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're actively protecting your future mobility and comfort is invaluable. The urgency of making these changes cannot be overstated, particularly for anyone who has already begun experiencing symptoms like back stiffness, pain, reduced flexibility, or difficulty with movements that were once effortless. Every day that passes with continued poor resting habits is another day of potential damage accumulation that may become increasingly difficult to reverse as time goes on. The earlier you begin implementing proper positioning strategies and supportive habits, the better your chances of preventing significant structural changes and maintaining optimal spinal function throughout your later years. Your spine has served you faithfully throughout your entire life, supporting every movement, absorbing countless impacts, and adapting to the demands you've placed upon it through decades of activity. Now, in your later years, it deserves your conscious attention and care to ensure that it can continue serving you well for many years to come. The simple act of changing how you rest on your sofa could be the difference between maintaining your independence and mobility or facing a future limited by pain, stiffness, and progressive disability. The choice is yours, and the time to make it is right now, before another evening passes in positions that steal away your future comfort and freedom one cushion at a time.